Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Freaky, starring Vince Vaughn, Catherine Newton, Katie Finneran, Celeste O'Connor, and Alan Ruck, directed by Christopher Landon. Now, I gotta say, I didn't go to theaters for this because no thanks to COVID, but I did rent it eventually on Apple TV, and I remember having a good old entertaining time with it. So let's see if that still remains the truth. Let's get into the movie. When I first saw this movie and saw the Universal logo was all red and shit, I thought it had something to do with my TV being broken, but it's a part of the movie, and it did scare the shit out of me right off the bat. But moving forward to the start of the movie, we start with Wednesday the 11th at nighttime, as some kids tell a story about a serial killer that is the butcher, who's played by Vince Vaughn. And they believe it's a bunch of bullshit and jokes on them when the butcher comes to the house. And don't ask me how he knew they were going to tell his story to begin with, which makes me think of this is Friday the 13th, but Jason is the butcher, as it's the same height as Vince Vaughn as he pokes a hole from a broken wine bottle through a guy's neck, which is the most fucking painful death of this entire movie, as he kills a girl named Sandra with the toilet seat and kills another guy using a tennis racket in between in his head, and kills the girl who owns the house that looks like a mansion as she hides behind a closet, which is clever as fuck. And he does eventually find her in as the parents come home and to find her pinned on the wall, and grabs a powerful knife with power itself stolen from them, which is the best deaths in this whole movie, in my opinion. Thursday the 12th comes, and Millie, played by Catherine Newton, eats breakfast with her mom and her cop sister, Charlene, who's the most vicious bitch to her mother, while she wants to take Millie to a playhouse, the mother I mean, to see Wicked instead of going to a homecoming dance, as her power is guilt tripping Millie, while her friends Neela, played by Celeste O'Connor, and Josh, who happens to be a homosexual while she has them as a friend. But other than that, she's an outcast, as the crush of her life in high school doesn't know she exists, as her teacher, Mr. Bernardi, played by Alan Ruck, who's the biggest asshole to her by telling her to present her presentation in the woodshop class, and they get an emergency reminder of the Blissville butcher is alive and still walking, which is frightening to high school students. But I'm liking these characters thus far. While Millie is dressed like a beaver for the football game, she waits for an hour for her mother to show up and doesn't answer her phone. And I thought, what kind of mother does that to her child while passing out on the couch and gets a call from Charlene about the incident? And as she picks her up from the football game with nobody around, and the butcher is at the high school and encounters Millie and goes after her and stabs her with the powerful knife, as she'll survive thanks to her sister, who's a cop, arriving before she was dead. And the whole Freaky Friday thing begins on the next day, which happens to be Friday the 13th. And this viewing made me think this is Friday the 13th mixed in a blender with Freaky Friday. But Millie will switch places with the butcher, and the butcher wakes up in Millie's bed, and as the butcher have 24 hours to switch her own body to her own body, which is totally Freaky Friday, but done much better than the remake. But confessionally, I've never seen the original Freaky Friday, I'll say. Maybe one day I might, as this is some scary moments and with some good deaths and some scenes that's more hilarious to me. While Millie the Butcher, which I'll call her as the Vince Vaughn character, and Catherine Newton's character I'll call Butcher the Millie, for the rest of the show until they switch back at the end, and people don't realize it. And as she has the knife about to stab Charlene, I thought, come on, you know that's not Millie. But people don't realize it first nor do they recognize Millie as a man. And I love how Butcher the Millie dresses up at school for the rest of the movie, as she looks like a new person who happens to be a murderer. And as she enters the school and tells her friends to fuck off and goes with the school bitch Ryler to go to a place private to kill her, a private place, let's say, to kill her, which I knew was coming, but I like how creepy Butcher the Millie throughout the movie is. And the script is pretty damn funny, but at the same time, pretty damn scary. As Ryler sees Millie the Butcher in the shower, and Butcher the Millie kills off Ryler in a big freezer, and we see Mr. Bernardi getting Millie to woodshop class as Neela and Josh see Millie the Butcher and run away to keep throwing things at Millie the Butcher and hit her with weapons as Millie the Butcher says the dance at the football game to tell them Pitch Perfect 2 is her favorite movie and Sabrina is her favorite TV show. Tells them her crush is Booker Strode and tells them what happened the night before as they recognize the knife and ask a teacher to explain what its power is to switch the bodies permanently 24 hours after the term of events, which is very familiar, but in my opinion, this movie is a guilty pleasure. Butcher the Millie comes to Mr. Bernardi's classroom and kills his ass off with a saw and cutting him in half, which was all over the top hilarious as it's done rather great. Millie the Butcher, Neela, and Josh see Butcher the Millie as she calls out the butcher and they run out to the car and get chased by not only the cops, but Charlene is going after them as well and hides Millie the Butcher in a changing room as she's encountered by her own mother and hears the story of what happened when he wore polo. And he tells Millie the story, or she tells Millie the story. And she tells her mother she lost her father, and the dialogue works as she tells her mother to give her space after her father's death, and tells her how much Millie loves her as she's disguised as the butcher, and dresses her up as a football player, which is a little silly, as they see Butcher the Millie at a mini golf place. And as they get there, they find Booker, and they kidnap him as well as Butcher the Millie. And I really like the way they eventually talk and convince how Butcher the Butcher is Millie in his body by writing her Booker a poem and putting it in her locker, as this movie is amusing to me. Millie, Neela, and Booker go to the police station while Josh is stuck with the Butcher as Millie, and Booker has some quiet dialogue with each other as he read her poem 100 times and says he liked her since day one, and they do eventually kiss as Millie is still the Butcher at this point, which was very funny. Josh's mother comes home as she sees Millie and the Butcher on her dining table, let's say, as he says they're role playing, which is a sex game, which kind of stupid. And the Butcher got confused as it was amusing in an inappropriate kind of way until the Butcher has escaped and gets out of Josh's house, and as it felt briefly like a home invasion movie, but done in a clever way, Butcher the Millie comes to the police station to Charlene pointing a gun at Neela and Millie the Butcher. And Josh comes in and puts Charlene in a jail cell, while Butcher the Millie goes to a high school party as she's concerned by the football players who want to rape her, but the Butcher kills them off and grabs a chainsaw at one football player and kills him with the chainsaw, while Millie the Butcher, Neela, and Booker and Josh arrive at the same place, and Josh tries to find her, but the Butcher kills another football player in the eyeball, which was gruesome for damn sure. As Millie and the Butcher fight for Millie's body, and they go all over the Butcher and catch up to Millie's body as the timer goes off, and they think it's too late, and they realize it's not midnight yet, as we learned earlier that Booker set her timer for 5 minutes beforehand and stabs Millie's body one more time, and they switch bodies back to where they belong, and the cops show up and shoot the Butcher down, and Millie and Booker kiss once again, and they get away from town for a bit and get encountered by the Butcher, and she kicks him in the nuts and says having balls sucks, which was hilarious, and she kills the Butcher off forever And the climax was thrilling and pretty damn funny as it works fucking great. Now it's time for the rating. I'll give this movie a 8.0 out of 10. This movie was a hell of a lot of fun as the characters are very likable. It's frightening, funny, and it's a good mix with Friday the 13th and Freaky Friday as we get this movie as a good combination, as this maybe with an exception of A Quiet Place parts 1 and 2 is scary in its own way. This was an entertaining ride as the movie is completely a guilty pleasure of mine, and I would watch this again over any bad horror movie for that matter. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me for this review, and until then, let's get freaky.